It is a brand new episode of Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. We're here on the 24th of June, 2024. The cup still hasn't been handed out. We'll get to that. That's kind of on the back burner today, even though we got Game 7 tonight. But there's a ton to talk about. And joining us in this episode is every Monday from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. It is Bill Meltzer. And, Bill, I don't know that I've gotten as many DMs, tweets, and saying, I can't wait for the podcast tomorrow. I bet you and Bill can't wait to do the podcast for tomorrow than I did yesterday when news began to break of the eventual arrival of Matvei Michkov. How is your Sunday going?
Well, my phone blew up.
Yeah, me too.
It's very exciting. It's ahead of schedule. Not to pour any cold water or anything, because I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. But with the KHL and Russian players, nothing is done until it's done.
Yeah.
So you got to get them over here, get it done, and then then you can get, truly get excited. But I think there's some reason for optimism.
Bill, I don't recall a day. God, it feels like it's been so long. Maybe even since Chris Pronger, and there was probably Twitter's in its infancy at that point, where Flyer fans are universally, dare I say, happy. There's nobody out there kind of going, well, this isn't a good thing. Everybody seems to be happy.
I actually got one. There's
always one.
One person who said, well, I don't want him to be a rookie this season because then he's up for his next contract sooner, and then he gets expensive. It's like,
yeah.
Can you be happy for just for a while, please?
Yeah, come on.
Anyway.
We're entitled to good things, damn it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
But the overriding theme, Michkov coming this early, there's a huge trickle-down effect to that, which could actually land into this draft when it comes to Demidov. But let's start here in the trickle-down effect. First of all, what does this early arrival tell you about Danny Briere, Keith Jones, and Dan Hilferty and the Flyers brass, that they were able to make this happen? Let's assume that it is definitely happening. What does it tell you about those three gentlemen in hockey operations in general?
Well, it tells you when they see something they want to get and it's within reach, they're going to go get it.
Yeah.
They will get it done. And they won't play it out in public either till it's, they can operate, they can hide in the weeds a little bit. And,
clandestine.
And yeah, absolutely. And that's absolutely a necessity, because the more it's talked about publicly, to me, the more chance it is that something falls apart. That was why there was that little caveat at the beginning. I think that, I think that it shows a devotion to, to getting the best talent you can when it's available, and take, Danny Briere talked about the other day, this press conference. You have to be willing to take a little bit of risk too, and the Flyers took a risk last year in drafting Michkov. There was the risk of having to wait 3 years, and they were prepared to wait 3 years if they had to. Feeling that this player would be worth waiting for if you had to do that. Sometimes you go, oh, it's the Russian factor. Oh, it's a small forward. You can talk yourself out of something.
Yeah, easily.
And rather than looking at what's the potential benefit of doing this, and you take on some risk if you feel it's a reasonable risk, and then that's how teams succeed in the long term. Let's be honest. Michkov alone would not make the Flyers an instant contender. Nothing like that. But it would be a huge piece in the puzzle towards putting together a roster that can compete in the near future. And keeping in mind too that you have guys that are like Tippett, who are in their mid 20s now. If you're waiting 3 more years, for Michkov, now these guys are in their late 20s, and so I mean, really, you were taking some calculated risks here. You're banking on his development. You're banking on a lot of things, right? making an impact in the relatively near future. I think he's a guy that even organizations that bypass and recognize the upside. How do you not when he came was 1 point away from setting the record for a teenager in the KHL this year under tough circumstances too.
Lost his father,
because he lost his father. He had a bout with pneumonia. He
switched teams.
Was switched teams again. He was loaned from SKA to Sochi. He played center. He played center in the preseason, then moved back to his natural position. So there were a lot of obstacles he had to overcome this year, and playing on a not very good team too.
Yeah,
which it did mean more ice time, but it also meant he had to create a lot of his own offense.
Yeah, and the matchups aren't as pliable as they might be when you have other very talented lines to go out.
Exactly, and he, he's been succeeding at a pretty high level in the KHL again, especially for a player his age. So there's a ton to be excited about, and something too with Michkov. I think his skating will only get better. He's not the fastest straight line guy. He's very good in his edges, though, which to me is sometimes more important, actually, than straight line speed. But last year was the first year he really hit the gym in his life because he's played a ton of hockey. He would focus on skating and stick handling and shooting, but he still has quite a bit of room to add strength. That's more of an off-season thing, but I think you'll see over the next few off-seasons he'll fill out more. He'll add a little bit of explosiveness. And there'll be that element to him as well. So I think I don't think he's even scratched the surface of things he's capable of doing. I think there will be growing pains and adjustments, but I think there's a lot of reason to be excited that this is a guy who can be a major impact player in the NHL. Probably by his early 20s, I would say.
Bill, is the best comparable a fellow countryman of his and Nikita Kucherov? That Kucherov's not the biggest burner straight line, but it's the quick twitch. Yeah. It's the I'll lull you to sleep and then I will assassinate you kind of thing, and just the vision, the playmaking, the offensive instincts. I mean, they skate differently, but they play similarly. And I think that's kind of like the trajectory of a player like Michkov. Is he going to be a generational player, and put up numbers like Bedard? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. But I will remind people that, a guy like Kucherov scored over 140 points and led the NHL this season. I think that's kind of where this is.
And I think the two other traits they have in common are the deceptiveness of their hands.
Yeah, I agree.
The release point, and they can. They give goalies fits, and they can find a puck size opening, and they know it's there before the goalie knows it's open, And the second part of it is the fearlessness. Now that can cut both ways because he'll turn some pucks over, some will come back, and a few will end up in your net, But you want to have that fearlessness and that competitive drive because those are things you can't really teach. And
it's so instinctual, right? The way that he and a player
it's so instinctual for those guys, absolutely. And that's and he absolutely has that. I mean, and anyone who watched him in the under 18 Worlds, actually, the last time Russia competed, he was under in the under 18s as a 16-year-old and dominating, And these are the best players in the world, 2 years older than him, in a lot of cases. So. I think all the elements are there. Now it's going to take, it'll take some time and some patience, and I have no doubt the work ethic and the dedication are there. He eats, sleeps, and breathes hockey, so that I have no worries, in that regard.
Bill, I had a very smart hockey man tell me that there are essentially two kinds of GMs in the NHL. There are the GMs that have the job, want the job, need the job. And those are the kind of GMs that are making moves and decisions to keep their job. There's other GMs that, they want to keep their job, but the byproduct is they're willing to put the cheese on the line and make really difficult decisions and take on risk to be great. And it's just like what Torts talks about. Safe is death. and you cannot be safe as a general manager. This move last year, the trade of Cutter Gauthier when communication had ceased, all of the things that they have done are not safe. Are they going to work out? Time will tell that. But I think what we're learning about Danny Briere is that he is not a safe general manager. Paul Holmgren was not a safe general manager. Bob Clark was not a safe general manager. They went for it, and they put their cheese out there and put their jobs on the line to do it. And I think in a 32-team NHL, you have absolutely got to take on risk if you want to be great.
You have to. Otherwise, what happens is even if you make smart moves in building a foundation, adding pieces to that, because at some point you're going to have to give quality to get quality.
Yeah, you may have to overpay in a trade to win the war.
Yeah, exactly. And there might be a short-term step back, a short-term loss for bigger gains in the in the relatively near future. Sometimes they're painful decisions, and sometimes I think there's a temptation to make the safe move. Hope you can hold on to your job. You won't make mistakes. Yeah. But the problem is you also don't make moves that make the true impact that will push you to higher echelon. And given where the Flyers are right now in a rebuilding stage, boy, it takes some guts to take some risky moves.
Yeah.
That could pay off big or not work out. I mean, there's always that risk too. But I think that if you want to get to those next steps in a rebuild, whether that's a year from now, 2 years from now, but you always have to be thinking ahead too, right? Where do you want to be in a year? Where do you want to be in 2 years, and whatnot? I think that that's the main element that you need, because otherwise you're just being reactive to your immediate situation and you're putting Band-Aids on things a lot of times.
Proactive, not reactive. You've got to dictate I totally agree with you. You see so many teams that have put this great, structure in place, whether it's Buffalo or Ottawa, but they've gotten these pieces that they've drafted and developed to some degree, but that's where you got to take on some risk. And those teams haven't been able to do it. Detroit's been very prudent. I think that will work out for them, but there's teams that I think the general manager is trying to keep his job, not trying to really do what it takes to win. Everybody wants to win. They all say that. It's easy to say, but are you willing to put your livelihood on the line to do it? That's the big question. Bill, what kind of effect does Michkov's arrival have on the negotiations with Travis Konecny? It's a question I got quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that it directly affects Konecny. I think the Flyers will act as they will.
Just optically here.
Yeah, I mean, optically, I do think that, I think it's the same decision though. Do you extend him long term? Do you sign him to the 7-8 year contract? I think that decision was facing them either which way. But the thing too, I think also is you'd like to be competitive. To me, within the next few years, if you were to trade Konecny playing through that scenario, you'll get a good prospect, you get a good pick. You're also slowing down the rebuild timeline a little bit. Now
you're kicking the can down the road a little bit.
You're kicking the can down the road, and I think the one thing I don't see is one of those things where you're halfway through the season, he's only signed through the season, and then are you figuring out, do we extend him or do we make the move? If I had to put money down on it, I would still bet he gets extended, and I still expect that. But if a move is made with him, I don't expect it being like a deadline thing. I would think it would happen this offseason. But
before the puck drops on the regular season, I think is kind of the key spot.
I agree with you. And
we talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
His last contract, he missed some camp time.
Yes.
When he was a restricted free agent to sign this bridge deal. So same agents drove a hard bargain then, and will probably drive a pretty hard bargain here.
I would think so. I mean, He led the team in scoring back-to-back years. He's been an all-star, for the team this year, and probably should have been the year before that.
Yep.
This is it. This is his chance to really cash in a year away from unrestricted free agency. So, and then as you pointed out, his last contract was a tough negotiation. Both Provorov and Konecny were not there for the first day of camp. It was actually the very beginning of Alain Vigneault.
Yeah, he was not happy about it.
He was not happy about it, but both guys got signed within the next few days. But so it might take all summer, to get it done. But I agree with you. When the puck hits the ice, you really wouldn't have that decision made. And we just talked about being safe versus being bold. I mean, either which way, it's a bold move. Whether you're signing him for 7-8 years at a big cap hit, or whether you're deciding to make a move now, either which way you're incurring risk. To me, the safe move is we'll just see how it plays out for half a season, whatever. So that falls in line with, I don't think they're going to be safe. They're going to be bold one way or the other, and we'll see how it works out. But I predict ultimately he does get the extension.
I think the effect of having him on one line on the wing and Michkov on another only benefits both.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure, because it creates a matchup.
Yeah,
difficult. And I would think at least at the beginning you slot Michkov a line down too.
Yeah.
Give him a chance to acclimate himself.
Yeah, that's the other question I've gotten quite a bit, Bill. Who does Michkov play with? And I go, well, that's impossible for me to answer right now. I don't know what kind of space he's going to be able to create in the NHL. I don't know what kind of size he needs in a player that plays with him, whether that's a center or another winger. I don't know any of these things just yet, so I can't really decide. But if I look at it just to answer the question that I've gotten 1,000 times, I'm sure you've gotten it too, of who makes sense for him to play with, to me it's Morgan Frost and Owen Tippett.
Yes.
Tippett because he drives the ice and he's a big body. I'd like to see a little more bite from Tippett at times, and maybe that comes. Just to force the physical presence a little bit more. I don't need him hitting guys through the boards, just being more of a bear. And then the creativity of Frost with the play driving of Owen Tippett and the creativity of both Frost and Michkov together. I mean, Jesus, that sounds like a line that could be really, really hard to deal with for any team.
Yeah, and of course, the other side is the 200-foot part of it, and Frost gets a bad rap defensively. He's fine. He's just small.
Yeah, I don't care about the 200-foot part in this.
Yeah, no,
I got two other lines that are going to take care of that.
I do think though you want someone who is a good forechecker, will go in, win the puck, be the first forechecker in, and when you need somebody back, he'll be back. He'll be first one back on the play. That's not really Tippett. Tippett likes to drive. I mean, but offensively, that certainly is your most dynamic line. You might take it another way to at least experiment. Not that I think Noah Cates is the right guy offensively, but certainly in terms of he's a very good forechecker. Very reliable, and he can play with a variety of different kind of line mates. That might be also something you would look at. Center wise, I mean.
Couturier?
Maybe Couturier because he's big and plays the 200-foot game. I don't think Paling or Lawton are the right guys for him. So
yeah, I agree. I think Couturier would be an interesting one. I remember when AV was coaching here, in that first year you just talked about. Somebody told me this. They said every time we changed, we're going through a little bit of a rough stretch and we're going to change the lines. There was a line out the door of wingers going, let me play with Couturier. Because they knew it would free them up to do a lot of other things. They all wanted to play with him. He provided a lot for those guys. We'll see where the line mates go. It is an exciting time. It's crazy, Bill, because we're sitting here on the 24th and Cup hasn't been handed out, but we're just about a year from last year's draft. And I remember that night, I'm down at the shore. We're doing the draft show. And we go, holy cow, they drafted him, right? Yeah. And Canadians took Reinbacher because they didn't think Michkov would be here. Now Michkov is likely going to beat Reinbacher to the NHL. I mean, it's bananas.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. Bill, there's been a lot of smoke around the Senators in regards to the Flyers. A lot of reports out there. Danny Briere had his media availability last week. Said they'd like to move up. Maybe they'll move down. Maybe they'll stay where they are. I mean, he was like as non-committal as they come. Yeah. He put out, we could do any of these scenarios, anything.
Yeah, we could move up, we could move down, we could stand pat. Yes, okay,
yeah.
You kind of run through every possibility. Yes.
It's like, yeah, you could, but I get the sense that Danny's preference is to be bold and move up.
I would think it. I would think so. And a lot of years, you don't see a lot of moves. There's always a ton of rumors about teams looking to move their pick. This year a couple of teams have been open, saying, it's up for grabs in the right deal.
Buffalo being one.
Buffalo being one, which would be maybe a bump up of one spot, or Ottawa being a bump up of 5 spots, which is more significant. But maybe just play through a Buffalo scenario where since they are really looking to win now, after 13 straight years out of the playoffs, they really want to add pieces that they could get in the postseason this year because jobs are on the line, right? This would be the end of the line. Yeah, they would turn over the regime with another year out of the playoffs. So maybe with Buffalo, there's a scenario where you're drafting 11th and 12th because they're really looking for now. So that might be one thing. Moving up to 7th would be. Would be really, because that opens up obviously the range of directions you could go with your pick. And, there's even rumors about a double bump.
The Howie Roseman up. Double move.
Yes. Moving up and then moving up again.
Yeah.
And that's hard to get accomplished. But I mean, there's a whole lot of possibilities this year. I think that whether they do move up or whether they stand pat, they should be able to get a pretty good player. This is a defenseman heavy draft, particularly in the top 10 this year. So there are defensemen of interest, but but the Flyers, I think ideally,
center.
I think there's not a lot of centers this year. There's some guys who are swingmen who can play center and wing. There's really only one big center who's high-end skill, which is Lindstrom, but I don't think there's any chance he's even there at 7. I think he goes in the top 5.
Yeah.
But still, they're high-skill guys, maybe a little bit on the smaller side, or maybe have the possibility that they end up on a wing rather than center. But there's nothing wrong with a high-skill winger either. If you draft a guy who's a center and he ends up on a wing, that's okay. That's okay. So there's a lot of possibilities here too, and again some quality defensemen as well. So I think the Flyers are in a good spot. The general word that Brent Flair and I think Danny kind of reiterated this too. The top half of the first round is pretty solid. Maybe it's not slam dunk candidates who this guy's going to be a franchise player. He's going to step right in, whatnot, right? But there are guys who in pretty quick order can be good NHL players. When you get to the bottom half of the second round, it's not that the upside isn't high on some of these guys, but there's more risk that's involved.
Yeah,
there's more holes that will have to be filled in. I'm interested to see also what the Flyers end up doing, with the 31st or 32nd pick. We thought it was going to be the 32nd pick for sure. Yeah. Maybe it's the 31st. We'll
I think it's the 31st now, Bill. I'll be honest with you. I think Edmonton wins this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what they do with that, and then we have to see if they end up with Columbus's pick. Columbus will have to decide that, I think, after the first night of the draft. And then they also have the compensatory pick from Jay O'Brien. So they got a lot of versatility here in this draft, and we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be fascinating come this weekend, and what happens on the draft floor. The thing is, a lot of people say, well, you got to move up in the draft, but it's easy to say that. You have to have a partner. You don't dance by yourself to get something done. You have to have willing people. And look, the teams that are drafting ahead of them have, by proxy of the way the draft works, greater need. Because this draft is exactly how they finished in the regular season. Yeah. And a lot of times those GMs, now going back to what we talked about before about the safe aspect and risk of a GM, some of those GMs need to bleep or get off the pot and need to make something happen that helps them now, and the draft pick can be pried away. That's where this balance comes in. And look, the names that are out there are obvious. Scott Lawton's a name that's been out there quite a bit, and We've heard some other names with the Flyers, and whether that's in a trade to move up to 7 and get a D-man or Shabbat or Chikrin or whoever from Ottawa. This is going to be a pretty monumental couple of weeks here for the Flyers. And obviously that's kicking off with a player like MICHKOV coming over. Bill, one of the other things I want to get back to with MICHKOV, the trickle-down effect, something I know you've seen it a ton, I've seen it quite a bit as well, is, well, how's John Tortorella going to handle Matvei MICHKOV? Now, that's one of the narratives about Torts, which I don't know that is true, because I see a lot of really gifted young players play for him that aren't shot blockers. Look at how Konecny has flourished under him. Look at how Zach Werenski flourished under Torts in Columbus. Even Artemi Panarin is a guy that takes on a lot of risk. You go back earlier in his career, all the way back to Tampa and Marty St. Louis. And look, Cavier was going to be great. He was right at the top of the draft player, but there was a lot of, teaching that had to happen there. But that notion that how is Torts going to handle a player like MICHKOV? Torts referenced him last year. So the reason why we're playing high-paced transition hockey is that when the Mad Russian gets here, we're already used to playing that style because he's got to play that style.
Yeah, he'll be demanding. They'll have to come to an understanding at some point. I don't think Torts will change the way that he coaches in any significant degree. I think that MICHKOV is going to have to basically earn the leeway that Konecny has.
Yep.
More than once, Tortorella has said, sometimes I just close my eyes and I have to just let him play.
Yeah.
I don't have much doubt in my mind that MICHKOV is going to be that kind of player too. He'll do some things that Tortorella's just going to have to live with.
Yep.
And as long as there's some give and take to it, you give some, you get some. I think that they'd be fine because there's an understanding that the Flyers didn't draft MICHKOV to be a 200-foot winger. He's here to score.
Yeah,
and Tortorella's coached a long time. He understands that for this player to really hit the way that they are counting on him hitting, he's going to need a little freedom.
Yep.
And it's not like Panarin was any great 200-foot player either. Now he was a little older, right? And he had some track record of success in Chicago.
Yep.
So I don't think that MICHKOV will get carte blanche on day one. But I think once he shows, that he has the it factor, I think that they'll find some kind of a middle ground in there to where, whether there's give and take, and again, he's had star players on his rosters before, so it works. What it's meant to work out, it works out.
Yeah, I think it'll be one of those things that will be a talking point, and look, there may be a time when he gets benched for a third period or a second period. Nobody's immune. Nobody's immune to it. And here, the fact of the matter is I think Torts coaches all of next year. Beyond that, I don't know what happens because he'll be going into the final year of his deal. I think there'll be a succession plan. I think Torts came in here eyes wide open, knowing he needed to get this organization back on the rails. And to me, they look very much back on the rails in so many ways, not just the accountability, the standard, but operationally behind the scenes, a front office that's got some stones and willing to put it on the line. All of those things tell me that the thing's going in the right direction. And there's probably some kind of succession plan. What it is, there can't be a gap here to me. I don't think Torts going in like he did in Columbus, as you and I have talked about, in a lame duck year makes sense. Yeah. But if next offseason a coach like John Cooper or Mike Sullivan is available, I think it's a baton handoff.
I think quite possibly, and listen, today actually is Torts' birthday.
Happy birthday, Torts.
Yeah, happy birthday, Torts. You go another year, 2 years out, right? And he's very energetic. He doesn't seem like an old coach, but the fact is that 2 years further out, are you going to commit to him into his 70s as coach? Probably not, and I don't think Torti himself even expects that. I don't know how many more years he wants to coach. I know he at least wants to coach one more.
Yep.
But he said that that in hindsight, his tenure in Columbus, he probably shouldn't have coached that lame duck year. He probably should have been out a year earlier. Yeah. And that's the situation it's going to be after next season. We'll have 1 year left on the contract. I don't know. I would think that it's a not insignificant chance that this coming season is the last year as Flyers coach. You do need a succession plan.
Yeah.
You have to have guys in mind, because the last thing the Flyers can afford is a year where they're it's an interim guy for a period. Just guy got to fill a gap for a year. They really need to come up with the guy they want to tab to be their long-term guy. Now we'll see what happens in Pittsburgh, but the window seems to be closed there. There's the mentor relationship that Tortorella has had with Sullivan. They're very close.
They talk multiple times a week.
Yes. And so there'd be the seal of approval and a lot of continuity if you move from that regime into a Sullivan regime. If it were to work out, though. And obviously Cooper's had so much success in Tampa Bay and worked with so many players and in a lot of circles is considered an elite NHL coach, and he's earned that. Again, I don't know if he's out there next year. But I think you can't go from a guy who's had the kind of tenure and reputation among other coaches that Tortorella has had, and step back with a guy who
a Dave Hackstall
experience. A guy you're just doing his first coaching gig to. I don't think that this would be the time to do it in the middle of a rebuild. Maybe if you're just starting with I just don't see it. I think the next coach will be another veteran, a younger veteran. And they try to have as much continuity as possible, maybe the Flyers have a dynamite year and they do extend towards, but I would think that just in terms of adding up what are the odds of things, I think there's a pretty decent chance that Torts is not coaching the Flyers in his last contract year, is doing something else in the organization, in the hockey operations department, and handing out the baton. Somebody. Yeah. I think that, and I think those discussions, while they won't play out publicly, I do think that those discussions, at least on a preliminary basis, have been had and will continue to be had.
I agree. Last thing, Bill, Game 7 tonight of the Stanley Cup Final on the 24th of June. Other than the absurdity of how late this is, I mean, geez, the draft is coming up in a couple of days.
Yeah.
But, man, I got to give Edmonton so much credit. They look dead and buried after Florida goes up 3-0. And for Edmonton to push their way back and force this Game 7 the way they had. I mean, in Game 6, McDavid and Draisaitl didn't get a point.
That should scare Florida, absolutely.
Yeah, and Florida is reeling right now. Boy, things can change so quickly. Can they get their legs under them for a Game 7 at home tonight? They have so much pressure. There's pressure on both teams here. I don't buy this. Well, they were down 3-0. There's no pressure on Edmonton. But you know what? Yeah. I almost said it.
Oh, the
cup is on the line. There's 60 minutes or 60 plus to determine who gets the chalice.
Yeah.
There's a huge pressure on both, but I can't see Florida getting it back under them here. I think Edmonton wins the cup tonight.
It sure feels like it. It sure feels like it. And yes, anything
this
can happen.
This would be devastating for those players. Devastating.
In playing through scenarios in my head, I don't see any scenario where Edmonton scores first and Florida wins.
Yeah,
right?
I
can't see scenarios where Florida scores first and Edmonton comes back for a couple goals and Edmonton goes ahead. And Florida almost has to grab a commanding lead in the game, and they don't have to be pretty.
But Bill, they've been not good in first periods again. Minus 13.
No, they were outplayed to an embarrassing degree.
Two shots in the first period in Game 6, and one of them was a dump in from their side of the red line.
Yeah, and listen, you never know if the offside goal had stood. And then now you're back by 10 seconds after Do you think it's 2-0? No, it's 2-1. You're on a power play, which has really been struggling.
Yeah.
Edmonton
would have scored a shorty.
Yeah, and Edmonton's penalty kill has just been outrageously hot. But it just takes one bounce off of a skate, and who knows? But so that certainly played in. But I'd be hard pressed to say that even had it been 2-1, the way the game was going, that it didn't feel like Edmonton was in control. So, I mean, Florida's going to have to really flip the script in a dramatic way. And I don't think home ice really matters. In fact, home ice might work against them.
I agree.
So, anything could happen, but I think all the signs at least point to the Oilers.
That video coach, to put his cheese on the line like that, holy man! Yes. In short order. I mean, that is not an easy one. And boy, and Chris Knobloch trusted him, and boom, the goal, it does not count. The thing about it is you look at Edmonton and his high flying, and McDavid's been McDavid and more these playoffs. He's been staggering. He's knocking down Gretzky playoff records, which is disgusting, and Hyman too. But you look at it, and the fact that Edmonton's given up 5 power play goals against in these playoffs are a huge reason why they are where they are. Freach pointed this out in 32 Thoughts or on Marek's show that there's like 6 teams that have given up more than 5 power play goals that didn't make it either out of the first round or out of the second round. They've played 25 games.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable number for a team you don't think of as selling out on the PK.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's why. I mean, we saw for the Flyers for a good part of the regular season, right?
Yeah.
How big was the PK and why the Flyers were contending for a playoff spot? They were more dangerous. They were more dangerous on the PK than they were on the power play.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember at one point they were, I think the PK was only -4 to the power play in early December.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It was crazy. So, it's always, it's always interesting to watch that whole push-pull anyway. But, but you look in the regular season and a 20% power play still puts you in the bottom third of the league.
Yeah.
Right. But you go ahead to the postseason, and I mean, Edmonton, both ends of Edmonton's special team, they were at 50% on the power play for a while in these playoffs too. So that's obviously it just goes to show you the importance of the special team side, particularly when you get to a playoff series.
Flyers go from 12.2% to about 20% in the league. It's about 22 more goals for this season.
Yeah.
Not insignificant. All right, Bill, great stuff. It's going to be a fascinating week. Make sure you follow Bill on Twitter at Bill Meltzer. And we'll be back Wednesday. And this is just it's hot out. They're heating up, and they're going to keep heating up. We got development camp. We might be seeing MICHKOV on the ice. It's just bananas. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. And we'll be back Wednesday with a brand new Flyers Daily.